Welcome, welcome, fearless writers. For those of you that are new, my name is Barrett Laurie. I am not only fantabulous, but I run this channel. This interview series is meant to connect my audience with authors and author entrepreneurs via a discussion-based interview format. The goal being to introduce up-and-coming authors with a new audience and hopefully expand their reach. The first half of the interview is all mine, my questions and my time. In the middle, we'll start a short rapid-fire questions section, and we end with questions from the audience in live chat. Please denote your questions with a Q so I can find them easily. If any authors or writer entrepreneurs would like to join me for a live stream interview, let me know, and I will shoot you a link that you can fill out to set yourself up with this kind of chat session. Let's move on to talking about our guest. A writer, speaker, and book mentor, Ginger Moran's areas of expertise are in memoir and fiction writing. She has a BA and MA in English from the University of Virginia and a Ph.D. in creative writing from the University of Houston. She taught at Fisk University and at the University of Virginia. She's published essays and short stories in numerous literary journals. Her published novels include The Algebra of Snow, American Queen, and her most recent, The Body of Summer, which becomes available this summer. It's available now. Currently, she writes and teaches people who have a story to tell and need to know how to tell it well. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to my guest, Ginger Moran. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Barrett. It's so good to see you.
Wonderful to have you. I'm excited to have you here. All right, let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about who you are. Take it away.
So you've already given me a great introduction. So my name is Ginger Moran, and I have been writing for a very long time. I've also been teaching for a very long time. I have degrees from the University of Virginia, and I actually went and got a PhD in creative writing from the University of Houston, where I studied with some really interesting people. So I have been doing those two things along with raising two sons by myself and raising a whole lot of dogs. And now I write and teach people mostly one-on-one full-time. So
I love that. So your academic path has been in creative writing. Do you remember the first time you identified that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I do, because I actually came to it super late. It was like a big surprise to me. I loved reading, and I loved English. So I was an English major. Then I was working on a master's degree in English, and I was actually working with a therapist at the time, and he was like, well, why don't you try writing a story? It's like, what, me? And like, I was in my 20s by then. So I'm not one of those people who start writing when she was like 2. I started late, and it's like, oh my God, why didn't I do this before? So I came to it pretty late, but then it just totally caught fire. And within a couple of years, I was finishing my master's in it and then going to do a PhD in it.
Interesting. I'm going to ask one that wasn't on our outline, but it popped up in my head as you were answering. So talk to me a little bit about your master's program and kind of what you took away. What was your biggest takeaway from that for you as a writer? What did you come away from that with? And then maybe same for your PhD.
Yeah, so my master's was at the University of Virginia. I worked with some really great writers. John Casey was one of them. He's kind of fallen into disrepute since then, but he was a great teacher, a really, really good teacher. I also worked with Ann Beattie there, the New Yorker short story writer. So I had incredible teachers. I was really just starting off at that point, and I can tell you, I wrote some really bad stuff. I wrote some really, really terrible short stories. So I wrote even worse ones in my PhD. So I have a lot of experience with writing things that nobody, including me, actually liked. So
do you think that's part of the rite of passage? I mean, isn't that kind of the thing for all of us to write those things and look back like years later and be like, what?
I absolutely do. And I think that it's just absolutely crucial to just stick with it, and stick with failing, stick with writing really terribly. Some of my best stuff started off just an absolute god-awful mess. So I am a huge fan of Anne Lamott's shitty first draft, and there's no way to get to the good stuff. Otherwise, you just can't. It's not going to happen until you do that. So, I'm all about failing spectacularly, failing fast, failing forward. Just fall in love with failure.
I'm all about that. I love that you say that. I think that's an academia thing. That's something I stress to I'd have kids in my lower level finance classes who'd be like, I cannot get these formulas and this stuff. And I'd say, I didn't get it the first time either. Like, it is okay to get a C on a test, and it's okay. It's okay. We teach kids, like, you have to be perfect. You have to, and it's too much pressure. Like, take that off of them and say, it's okay to fail. Like, it's cool.
It is. And in fact, you really have to. I often tell my clients, can you make this worse? Because they try to make it too pretty from the beginning. They try to make it too correct. They try to make it fit into a mold, and they miss the heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I know that it's there. I can tell it's underneath there, but they need to just let it loose to get to it themselves.
What is the best part about teaching for you?
It's I just have to say it comes from my very essence. It took me a really long time to understand that. Even though I pretend taught as a little girl in a particularly obnoxious and officious fashion to my dolls and my dogs and stuff. But it just is, I just have to say it's who I am. I'm a writer and a teacher. And it's taken me a really long time to understand that that's just the deal. It's like, well, you might as well just roll with it, because I just love doing it. I love sharing what I know with people. I love watching them get it. I love, now working with people on their books. I just love them, their sense of discovery and excitement and pride at getting their vision down. It's a great feeling. It's just a vicarious, it's a vicarious thrill. I love doing it myself. So I love helping other people do it too.
I love that. We're going to touch on this a little more when we talk about the body of summer, but how and in what ways has your real life inspired your writing?
So in so many ways, it's kind of ridiculous. Although I always write about people who are not me. So that's one of the things I preach a lot is, everybody says, well, write what you know. Well, if I wrote what I know, I write a whole lot of stories about women with a Ph.D. and 2 sons and a whole lifetime of dogs. And it would get really boring. So I write about people I don't know at all. But I would say that their essential character, always my main character, is a woman in many different professions. I put them in many different situations, many different, marital situations. The American Queen, I gave her a whole slew of children, and I don't have that many. So I put them in unusual situations. But I do have to say, if you really got down to it and I had to tell you the truth, everything in the books happened to me in one way or another.
That's interesting. I love that. So there's like a kernel of truth in the story.
Yes, always.
I love that. It reminds me, there was a master class I watched years ago for the author who wrote the Joy Luck Club. And one of the things she says in the master class is that people have told her that writing is writing lies. It's people who tell lies. And she said that she believes that writing is the way to finding truth. And I love that. I think that's profound and true. So now, let me ask you this before we move on to Body of Summer. What would you say has changed the most in publishing since you've been publishing? Like, in your publishing career, what's changed the most?
I have so much familiarity with the history of literature and history of publishing because, I have a PhD. So I had to read everything that was ever written. And I have such a sense of actual continuity, which seems counterintuitive. Lots and lots of people have self-published forever. Very few people have made it as mainstream writers full-time. Hemingway was a journalist. Faulkner wrote screenplays. Fitzgerald wrote short stories for magazines. Weirdly enough, I think, there was a lot of finding other ways to support yourself, and there was a lot of self-publishing, always in publishing. I actually taught a class in publishing at the University of Virginia, so I had a chance to really look deeply into it. I mean, I think for one thing, there is always change, but there's always a kind of consistency to it, and we tend to look back on the, 40s and 50s in American publishing as a kind of golden age, but it wasn't even a golden age at that time. As I said, those writers were supporting themselves in other ways. So it's kind of astonishing to look at the big picture.
I love that you said that, and I'm going to throw this comment from Maggie up. Oh, that's me up in the stream. The myth of the just novelist lifestyle is so true. It really is a myth. Like any of us who actually know people who do it, whether you're trad or self, doesn't really matter. Like it's the one tiny, maybe not even 1%, tiniest percentage.
It's a fraction of 1%. Yeah, Jane Friedman looks at those statistics from time to time. She's such a great person for looking at the world of publishing. She knows so much about it. But yeah, it's just it's good to just open the aperture and just look at the whole thing more creatively. Don't get stuck, and certainly don't measure yourself by standards that actually don't exist.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Totally. I all the time with author friends, I feel like I'm the Debbie Downer because they'll get their agent or whatever, and then they're like, "I'm going on submission. I'm going to get a 6-figure advance," and I'm like, "No, you're not." I mean, you might. I mean, you might be the one who does.
You might, but it is pretty rare. There are real constraints to that that people aren't familiar with. I mean, the publishing industry is so complicated, so opaque. It's always good to talk to somebody who actually knows the industry and can help you really navigate it, because it is. It's a confusing, complex world, and your expectations are probably all wrong. That's what I can say about it.
I love that. That's a great way of thinking about it. All right, let's do a shift into what we're here to talk about, the body of summer. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to real quick read the blurb that you sent me for everyone. So sit back and relax, everybody. The themes in Body have to do with love and family, the South, academia, class, inexplicable passion, proper proportion, and what matters in the long run. The entire novel takes place in the summer months in Virginia, which, as anyone knows who's been through the summer in the South, have a character all their own. So what inspired the book?
So the Algebra of Snow was actually my first novel. It was picked up by an agent and sent to publishers. Tons of people loved it, like editors at big publishing houses loved it, but they said, oh, this is too artistic. It's very interior. And it actually got nominated for a Pushcart Editor's Choice Award. They said, well, we can't publish this. It's like, oh, well, how with you? I just thought, I'm not going to write something that's really plotted.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know how to plot, because everything I love is very interior. So I actually had to learn how to plot in the course of this book. But I love mysteries. I just devour mysteries. For choice, that's what I read. So I thought, well, you've read so many of them. Why don't you try writing one? So there was all kinds of different things that went into it. I did grow up in Charlottesville. I did go to the University of Virginia. I ended up teaching at the University of Virginia. So I know Charlottesville super, super well. It's an incredibly beautiful landscape. It's a very rich world to live in. And I love summertime, and I love all the sensory input of summertime. I've always lived in the South or the Southwest, despite the fact that my politics don't align with what's generally thought of.
Me too, thanks.
And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I grew up in a super, super, super liberal household, academic. My parents were very active in civil rights in the South when I was a child. And, but I love the South. I'm deeply, deeply invested in the South. I care about it a lot, and I love writing about it. So I love Southern literature. I love Faulkner. I love Flannery O'Connor. I love the richness of that world. So all of that, plus probably when I was writing it, I was still in the middle of probably getting toward the end of a bad marriage. So. And that went into it too.
That helps.
Yeah, so I make the husband in the book. He's accused of murdering somebody.
I know. I noticed that, and I thought, and as my mother, who's divorced a couple times, I loved that too. I thought, oh, I can relate to that. I should have told you, my cousin is actually at UVA now. I live in Pocosin, Virginia, and so I spend a lot of time in Virginia. So I should have told you that in advance, but I couldn't agree more about the South being, because I was born in Kentucky and have family there.
Good for you. Good for you. One of my very best clients just published an absolutely gorgeous book that takes place in Kentucky. It's called The Hard Winter Fall of a Woman by Ed Hutchison.
Okay. Say it one more time, and I'm going to put it in chat for people. It was what?
It's called Hard Winter Fall of a Woman by Ed Hutchison, Hutchison. One of the most beautiful books I've ever read.
That's my mom.
Because I worked with him on it.
My mom's maiden name is Hutchison, so I know how to spell that.
Oh my God, you might be related.
I know, right? That's what I was thinking when I saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, we could be kin.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
But what I was going to say is, for anyone who hasn't really spent time in the South, and there are some other channels, Laurie Writes the Blues is one who is set in Mississippi, but for anyone who spent time in the South, and for people on this channel, I worked communications and politics for years, so I spent a lot of time all over the country. But there's something about the South that is, first of all, the people, the characters, the people you meet that inspire these ideas for characters, because there are so many characters there.
Really.
Then it's filled with lots of beautiful architecture and just country that I don't see much here in St. Louis. So I appreciate when I go south and see wide open spaces. It's quite beautiful and inspiring. So I would say to people, give it a shot. Check out some places down there. I'm glad we brought that up, because I wanted to switch over to the characters. And so for the characters in the story, you told us a little bit about what inspired the murderous husband. But as for your characters in general, you said they're not really you, which I love that. So you're not doing a self-insert. How do you develop them? Like, what does that look like for you? Are you doing a sort of a Bible, or is it in your outline, or how do you flesh them out?
I am such a pantser. I am just the world's worst pantser. I cannot organize. I've tried, and when I try to outline a book and do all that stuff, it immediately turns into a bad book. So I just pants my way through several drafts. I have the most ridiculous rating system in the entire universe. I actually handwrite at least 2 of my rough drafts because I feel like the story is in my hand. So this will sound like very mystical and woo-woo for somebody who is pretty rational, but it's just,
you're in the right place.
It's just part of the experience. It's the sensory experience of reading. I'm pretty old school. So that I don't do that. Now, I do have to say I have to go back a lot of times and work out a lot of that stuff, because they're like, who the heck is this person? But I so love the dopamine rush when a character starts doing things I told them not to do or didn't know they could do. In the Body of Summer, he's actually the villain, and the main character ends up falling a little bit in love with him. And she ends up having deep empathy for him. And he ended up so much more touching. I wanted him just to be a bad guy, but it didn't happen. He just turned into somebody much more interesting than that, much more layered and complex. And I couldn't stop my main character from falling in love with him a little bit, even though she was getting back together with her husband. So, yes, yeah. So I love for them to surprise me. I always have an idea who they are going into it, but then I just let them live it out. And again, that sounds way more woo-woo than it is. But I write so many drafts that by the time I get to the later drafts, they actually are really fleshed out. And anything that I left out, I've gone back and put in.
Interesting. I love this comment. The muse runs amok, the story of every writer's life.
Oh man, it's really alarming because like, wait a minute, who's running the show? But I remember Ann Tyler talking about, she kept her office really, really empty. Like she just didn't have stuff in it. She didn't have paintings on the wall. She just had a table. And that's all, because she said it got so crowded with all the characters that she just had to leave enough room for them. And it's a strange experience. So,
it's really interesting. Now, let's talk world building a little bit. So we've touched on how the South can be so inspiring.
Yeah.
How would you describe to someone who maybe has never been to the South, how it inspires your world building?
Yeah, so I actually teach about this quite a lot, because I think a lot of people, I just saw this in a group lately. It's like, well, I don't describe the world because I want my reader to imagine it for themselves. Like, no, you have to build that world for them. You have to build it and invite them into it. Even if it's a real place like Charlottesville, it's like not everybody's been there. So it's very rich and very layered. So it's not only the physical place, which it obviously is, and you need to have a sense of, you even have to have kind of mapped it out. You don't have to go as far as Tolkien did, but you do need to have mapped out your world. You need to know what it looks like. You need to know what the season is. You need to know what the weather is. Weather is huge. So people often forget to include weather, but it's super important. You need to know your roads, your houses, your colors. You need to understand all of that really deeply. But you also need to understand, I consider this part of world building, you need to understand the history. You need to know the time period. You need to know the cultural complexity. And the thing that I find myself more and more, you need to know race, you need to know gender, you need to know education. The thing that I find coming more and more to the center of what I'm writing about is class. You need to understand class and class relationships. That's all part of world building. So it's a pretty complicated business, and I actually spend a lot of time on that because I love the actual physical world so much. That's one of my favorite subjects. I love it. Just layer, keep layering.
So and we're going to riff off this because I find this fascinating. So for me, that's something I tell people, because I do a lot of drafts too. And I always say each draft, I added a layer, like for my book I queried, I ended up with 8 drafts, and each draft had more world.
Yes.
Each draft. Because I went through and said, oh, I should add a door where the trees, like each time something would spark. So that's
I often think of it as like a painting. It's like you'll start off with just your roughed in background. It's like, watch Bob Ross if you want to see about world building. It's like you're building, layering, all the way through. And your people, your objects only exist against that canvas that you've layered all of that in.
That I love. That's perfect. All right. So how do you pitch your book to others? If you catch someone in an elevator or they're passing your table for coffee, pre-panini, you're having a coffee and someone walks by, how do you pitch them if you're on a quick time? What do you tell them?
Yeah. So actually, I've forgotten I have memorized pitches because I do pitch at conferences. So there actually is a little formula for pitching, which has to do with you start with your theme. So that's why the description of body starts with the theme of, the South, academia, family, those are the themes that are good and evil, So I think a lot of people don't understand that books always have a theme. They always have a central problem they're tangling with. So I usually do start with that and pitching. Then you talk about your main character, and then you talk about where. So those are your 3 things to use in a pitch.
Do you do any kind of pitch lessons or anything?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody that I work with, when they're getting toward the end of the process and we're preparing for publication, I actually am going to teach a class sometime in September, October, with one of my clients who just pitched very successfully at a conference. And what we went through, it takes a lot of prep. So people think, I've stood in pitch lines with people where they're saying, well, I'm not sure which book I'm going to pitch. It's like, well, you need to know not just what book, but exactly what you're going to say to this particular agent. So it takes a lot of prep. It takes a lot of deep thinking about your own book. It's like, where is it not only in the publishing world, but where is it in the cultural world? My client was just pitching a book that takes place in Southern Florida, and the main character is white woman Ph.D. student, and the man she gets involved with in the course of the book is Cuban exile, and it's like it's such a central topic, and it's controversial to write about other cultures now. So we had to talk about that at length, and the agents asked her questions about, how do you do that without appropriating, blah, blah, blah. And we talked about it a great deal before she went into it, so she was all ready. So anyway, she's going to come out on and talk about that process and what she needed to know. So
wonderful. And so how can people find that for you? Is that through your website? Is that the best way?
It's really my mailing list. Sometimes I forget to put events on my website. So I definitely let people know by my mailing list. So they can
jump on that mailing list later today, and I encourage everyone else to do the same. The link is in the description box below, so do not miss it. On the pitch thing, I'm going to throw in one more thing for folks. Sure. If maybe you're thinking, hey, I'm not in a place where I can hire a consultant yet, use your writing group. Give your pitches to other writers and get their feedback way before you get in front of those agents would be my tip.
Absolutely.
I've done that in advance. And another quick tip that I'll give is, I don't know about you guys, but I love my librarian. I have a librarian at my library that is a girl. She knows what I like to read, but she is who I go to check my comps. And I'll go to her and say, hey,
brilliant.
Here's my story. Here's what I'm thinking for comps. What do you think? And let me just tell you, she has given me better comps every single time. So that's a tip for everybody out there, is find your librarian or bookish friend who reads all the time, and they're your go-to on those.
Librarians are the best. Yeah. And they're just dying for you to ask them something.
Agreed.
They're standing there waiting for you to ask them.
Agreed. No one loves books more. Like, they are our people. So talk to me a little bit about your writing process. We've talked about how you're a pantser, which was a question I was getting to later, so I'm glad we threw it out there. So what does a writing process look like for you, from the idea of when you think, spark of an idea, to publish?
Yeah, so I've done this so many times, and I've taught it so many times. I actually have it boiled down to a system, so I could talk about that pretty easily. So really, books have 4 different stages. And that doesn't mean 4 drafts, but it probably doesn't mean at least 4 drafts. So the first stage is just that dreamy, maybe there's a book there, I'm not so sure. That's the stage I just call conceive, where it's just starting, like the molecules are just starting to collect. You might be doing a little research, or my favorite research, which is to look up movies that have to do with the subject and just see if anything gets sparked in there. So the next stage I call create. That's where you're actually writing the draft, writing that shitty first draft. And it's like just such a glorious, messy, total, terrible writing fun. Yes. But just allowing yourself to go through that. And again, I usually have 2 or 3 drafts in that stage. So that can take me quite a while. But then the third stage is the crafting stage, where you're actually bringing the craft of good writing to bear. And there you totally shift gears. You're in a completely other gear. You're like really bearing down on it. And it's the reason I could let myself write so badly in the early stages, because I know that's coming, where I'm actually going to pay attention, and I'm actually going to turn it into a good book after I've had so much fun making a horrible mess of it. And then the very last stage is what I call connecting. And that's where you're really polishing it, making it all fit together, making the beginning and the end really click, because often my beginning is so exploratory. I have to get all the way through the end to figure out how to write the beginning well. You're also, getting ready to pitch, you're choosing your publishing path, you're, setting up to do that. So that's just a completely different stage. And I actually try not to think about that at all in the beginning stages. That's always a mistake, is to be thinking about what I'm going to do with it. I don't really know until I get all the way through the stages. So I try not to let that interfere too much with that, just finger painting, making a huge gooey, gushy mess of it.
I love that. I love that whole process. And I'm kind of sitting there clapping as I go, thinking like, I have so many friends I've worked with on stories where they get like halfway through or 3/4 through, and then they stop because it's not perfect or it's not this. And I'm like, you're never going to finish it if you don't just get it all down.
You've got to get it down. You have to. It's exactly the same thing. And it's just tragic, because it'll be a great story. It'll be a great idea, but you have to tolerate that lengthy process.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think so often I just think, and this is true of me too. We think because we're readers and because we love reading and because we have a really great ideas, that somehow it's just going to be like come out like magic, and that if it doesn't, it's there's something wrong with it, or there's something wrong with us. We had a bad idea, or we're terrible writers, or whatever it is. But Ian Paget told a story about going to a cocktail party one time and meeting somebody, and he asked her what she did. She said, "Well, I'm a writer. She's a national award-winning fiction and nonfiction writer. She's super famous." And he was like, "Oh, that's nice." And then she said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm a neurosurgeon." And he says, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm thinking about when I retire, I'm going to write a book." And she did not say this because she's Southern, but she wanted to say, "Oh, when I retire, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon." But, you have to learn the craft, you have to go through that process. And there are zillions of ways of doing that. But we're not born knowing how to write a good book, no matter what great readers we are. And we make our lives so much harder by thinking it's easy.
Agree.
It's a bit like thinking like having a kid is going to be easy, and you'll just like magically be a great parent. And it's like, no, that is not how it works. It is a long, long process and an enormous investment. And sometimes you think, what the hell was I thinking?
Totally.
And you just go forward. You go forward because you have to,
Yes.
You can't not do it. I often say to people, if you want to quit writing, quit. If it leaves you alone at that point, great, walk away. If it comes back and just keeps tugging on your skirt, your shirt tails, and you can't leave it, give in. Give in, go for it.
What would you say surprised you most about the publishing process for any of your books? Doesn't have to be Body of Summer.
Yeah, what surprised me about the publishing process? So I think my most recent surprise actually came from myself, which was I've traditionally published, or I published in lots of literary magazines and journals and won tons of awards. And I just took it for granted that I was only going to go traditional. And there was something about like this last period of time where I don't know if this happened to other people or not, but I kind of got down to an essence. It's like, what do I really genuinely care about? And at this point, I I don't need traditional publication for my career. I've already, my academic career is done, and I did great with that. And I don't need it to create standing in the world. I don't need it for a job. And did I want to keep pursuing that? Because that's just a particular path that has lots of challenges to it. Takes a really, really, really long time, to prepare your book, pitch your agent, get an agent, sell it to a publisher, or even when it gets to the publisher, it's going to be another 2 or 3 years before it comes in the world. So I surprised myself. I just thought, oh, the hell with it. I'm just going to self-publish these books, because I had a bunch of them that I had written, but I was raising kids and working full-time, and just didn't go through that process of pitching agents, thinking always that I would do that again. I've had several agents. And then it's all of a sudden, it's like, I don't want to. I feel like doing it this other way. I mean, one of the things I really talk to people about is, what do you want? What is your goal? Don't think there's this one way of doing anything. You can do whatever you want. You genuinely can. If you want to traditionally publish, you have to write a particular kind of book, and you have to be willing to go through that process. You're not going to make the market like your book. That is not going to happen. So if you want traditional publishing, you have to write a book that fits with that model. And you're going to have to do a whole lot of the PR yourself. You're really going to have to support. You will be your book's best friend. Your friends will be your book's best friends. You'll have to, it's all going to come down to you. And again, anybody can do anything they want. They need to be clear about what it is that they want.
That's right. I put it this way. If I had your background, I would be so much more sure of myself in self-publishing. So I've said this before to people, the reason I'm doing trad is I do not trust myself. I don't trust myself to know. I can on other people to say this isn't there yet, or this needs this, or this needs that. I don't trust myself. So on my own work, where I need someone else to be like, yep, this is ready, let's go, So for me, that's where I am.
Good for you.
But I say to everybody, just like you did, what's right for me isn't right for you. Or
that's exactly right.
It just won't be. So
you've made you know what you're talking about. You've made a super informed choice, and you know what it takes. Absolutely. That's it's all self-direction. What makes me angry is when people just go out there for out of approval addiction.
Yes.
Like somehow that thing is going to make me okay. It's like, nope. It does not work that way.
No, and I'd even say in traditional publishing, it's the opposite. You're only as good as your next manuscript. No one cares what your last one was.
It's a rough go. Yeah.
So I love that answer, and that's real, and I appreciate it, and thank you for that. What does for you? We've talked about the process. What does success look like for the Body of Summer, or what was your goal for it? You know what I mean, for the project.
Yeah, this to me was just like a big challenge. So, as I said, I've had my academic career. I love writing. I love teaching writing. And when I asked myself, what is it I want to have achieved at the end of time, which will be 100 years from now, but what is it that I want to have achieved? And I had to say, I want to leave it all on the field. I don't want to take anything with me. I don't want to have any books that I haven't published. I don't want to have there be some things I haven't said. I want to leave it all here. So it's like, I just thought, I actually have this incredible relationship with a fabulous book designer and publisher. I edit his book, so he's publishing mine. So I've been super, super lucky. And I just thought, man, what am I waiting for? It's like, John is a stupendous publisher and book designer, cover designer. It's just great professional stuff. And I just thought, I'm not leaving these things in my bottom drawer anymore. So
I love that. Talk to me a little bit. I didn't have this on the outline, so this is a surprise question. Hello, JC. Good to see you. Thank you for coming. I love that. Leave no book unpublished. I 100% agree. That was my motto of the day. Hashtag no words left behind.
There we go. You got to leave it all.
Exactly.
Leave it on the field.
Oh, Richard, stop it. But no, I was going to say the thing about that I think is so great is all of us have that feeling of like we've got that story that we're not sure about, and I love that you're like, go ahead and do it, like no day but today. So yes,
however you want to,
yeah,
don't hold back. You're denying your creative energy, and it doesn't like that. It makes it real cranky. So
right. Who's ready for the other two books? Let's get into the Algebra of Snow and American Queen. Are you ready? Let's shift gears. Let me pull up my outline so I can get back on track. What can you tell us about these two? We've talked a little bit about the Algebra of Snow before, but tell us a little bit about American Queen.
So American Queen is it's a political thriller, actually, but it takes a little bit of a different angle on things. I do have to say what it came out of the 2016 election. I just couldn't understand that election. I just couldn't make sense of it. And I've had a ton of experience in politics. I've been in politics one way or another, not straight politics, but I've been involved in activism all my life. And I know lots of people, and I'm rarely just like completely stumped by something. But I have to say that election stumped me. I just didn't understand it. And so that was actually the beginning of American Queen, is like, why do people vote against their own interests? And that actually...
We could do hours of a live stream on this where I pontificate, but go ahead.
Yeah. So it actually was just like most things, I always start a book with a question, with a puzzle for me, a mystery for me, something I don't understand, because it drives me through the book. It keeps me going. It's my touchstone. It's like, have I gotten to that? Or do I understand it any better? It's like, there's not necessarily an answer to that, but do I understand that any better? So that started a long process of like looking at that question through different lenses. I thought, well, I could look at it through the lens of psychology, religion, spirituality, blah, blah, blah. Those all kind of bored me a little bit. They just didn't quite get it for me. They didn't get the complexity of the issue for me. So I came across this field called behavioral economics, which actually has to do with how irrational people are. And I kind of love that. I was like, wow, that explains a lot of things, like my ex-husband. But
it was actually interesting in your country too, Richard, in the UK, because you all had Brexit and it was very similar. So for those of us,
it is. It's like, why do people make choices that are so manifestly against their own interests? So behavioral economics actually really looks at this. So I had just a hell of a good time, excuse my language, studying behavioral economics. So I actually had to like put myself through. I read Richard Thaler, and I read Dan Ariely. I had to read a whole bunch of stuff before I could even have a modicum of understanding. But basically, here was the fascinating thing to me, is that people make terrible choices. Like, human beings are absolutely god awful at choice. We just hardly ever make good choices. The economics, so Barrett, you know all about this. It's like, economics thinks we're rational people, and that, like, you look at a situation, it's like, well, this would be good for me, like saving for retirement. Duh, that's good for you, right? Nobody does it. It's like, well, why is that? It has to do with the fact that we think fast, we think in the moment. We find it very difficult to think in the future. like make a decision right now based on our future good. So one of the ways behavioral economists have come up with this, and Thaler's written this really interesting book called Nudge that has to do with how to change your own behavior or how to change groups' behavior. And it has to do with have people think about it as if it were a decision in the future, but apply it now. Like if you ask people if they want this raise to go into their retirement account, they all say, no way. But then you say, would you commit to having your next raise go into their retirement account? They're all like, oh yeah, no problem. Because they just think, well, that's never going to happen. You know, it's like that time is never going to come. But that's really the only way that we're capable of making good choices most of the time is to think about our future self. So we're actually like intimately engaged with that future self. But it just was so fascinating to me that, you know, this whole field of study where you're just studying how irrational people are.
Well, and that sets us up great as writers, because as long as people make horrible decisions, people will totally believe that our characters will make some awful decisions.
Awful decisions.
Great news for us.
Yeah. So my character is a behavioral economist. She has a Ph.D. in it, but she accidentally fell madly in love with a spy, married him. That kept her stuck in DC, so she couldn't pursue an academic career because her PhD is from Georgetown University, and you never could stay in your own area.
Right.
But she was stuck there because he was at Langley.
Yep.
And then they accidentally had 5 children. So
which happens when you're, you know, in Virginia with nothing to do in the summer.
So you just have another kid. Yeah.
I wanted my husband's fascinated by the American Queen story. He's got some questions for you that I see one in that just popped up for you later. Okay, so real quick, talk to us a little bit about the Pushcart Editor's Choice Award. You talked about it earlier on the Algebra of Snow. What was that process like, and how did that set you up for success or not with that book? Like, what was the game changer for you?
Yeah, so so it ended up just being nominated. It didn't win the award that year. So what happens with that is that if an editor sees a book that they really love, but they know it does not have commercial possibilities, enough commercial possibilities to make it worth selling, worth buying, they can nominate for the Pushcart Editor's Choice Award, which is a really, really nice award. It's really just acknowledging that it's a top quality book, but it's not commercial. So I have to say that like being nominated for that it was really just a super feel good and like a super affirmation that the book was really good. So that was my first novel, The Algebra of Snow, which is the world's most peculiar little book. And not commercial at all. It's, you know, nothing happens. So that doesn't really make a super exciting novel. But it was after, you know, you were talking before about wanting to know if it's good enough. And to me, that nomination meant that it was good enough. It wasn't commercial, but that was okay.
Yeah.
I had that imprimatur.
Totally. I'm tossing up a quick shout out for another thriller writer in our chat right now, The Diary of Succession of Lies by J.C. Carpenter. She just asked a question for you that we will get to in the next set. All right, so the concept of the Algebra of Snow is cool. It stripped the characters and take the complex plot, all of that away. So was it more difficult to write without the quote unquote normal aspects of a novel?
It was easier for me because I did not know how to have an ensemble of people doing different things at the same time. Like that was just too much chaos for me. So it's a woman mathematician alone in the Adirondack Mountains in winter. She's a mathematician on leave from Stony Brook University. I can't add, so I don't know why I made her a mathematician. That's like an algebraist. I actually was pretty good at algebra, but I think that's because it had letters in it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, well, that's as close to a sentence as I can get. You know,
My kids
equations,
were
a
either-
little bit of a sentence. So
My kids were great at algebra or great calculus. There was never like a cross. There was never a
no.
It was never a Venn diagram where those overlap.
No, there's no overlap. Yeah, yeah. So I at least picked one that I actually had been semi good at.
Yeah.
But I just had to take everything out. So it takes place over, it's like a Labor Day through Beltane, which is the Celtic May Day holiday. So it goes through the holidays and takes her through that process. It's it owes homage to Margaret Atwood's Surfacing, which is also a book that, even though it takes place in the summer, and there are a few more people in it, there are very few people. It's very interior, and I adore that book. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous book. So I kind of just followed her process, which is, again, it was my first novel. I needed to kind of be a little duckling to people I admired. So basically that's what I did with that one.
I love this. She says, I love that. I can't do it either. And algebra is the most confusing part of math to me. I'm always like, why are we trying to figure out a number for X and Y? They're letters. This is the one place of authorship where I feel very like empowered is anytime the writers on screen go, oh no, I have to do math. And I'm like, mathematician. I'm like, I can, that's where I can win. But no, that's great. I'm going to ask you a few more things before we move on to our next part of our discussion. Would you classify Algebra of Snow as women's literature? Would it be classified as women's lit? Or what
somebody told me it was actually a psychological thriller, which I think it kind of is. It's like a psychological thriller with one character.
Love
it's
that.
Really, is she going to make it? Is she going to survive? So yeah, I would definitely say it's women's literature. There's practically, everything I do is in a sense, like, if I had to put it in category B, most of my books I would put in the category of literary mysteries, but it's also upmarket women's.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you always intend to write in a multiple genre, to write more than one genre, or do you intend to kind of stay more close to this mystery thriller space?
No, I stumbled into the mystery because I was so mad that Algebra didn't get published. It's like, God damn it, I'm going to write something that can get published.
Yeah.
It's like, it was just out of sheer orneriness that I started writing mysteries. But then American Queen is not exactly a mystery. It is more of a spy thriller. Except she's not the spy, her husband is the spy, but she ends up doing some spying. I think literary mystery is really my home. It's the thing that I love the most. It gives you a chance to develop character, which I love so much, and world. It gives you a chance to deal with a problem, which is always central to whatever I'm doing. It's like, it's like that grain of sand that just bugs you. It's just like bugs you until you make it into a pearl, hopefully. But you also have to have plot. Like, I like plot. I like a story. I like something that I admire people who can draw you through, that process. And I have to say, an awful lot of contemporary American fiction just bores me silly because nothing happens. It's like, what happened to plot? What happened to story?
You notice the quiet books? And I know people write them. I don't get the quiet books. Like, I finish the quiet books and I'm like, what happened?
Yeah, like, where? That's a whole 10 hours I can't get back.
I know.
Yeah, and the great, the British modernists, who are my favorites in the entire universe, Woolf, Joyce, something happens, so maybe in Joyce's, he walks through Dublin all day, but you know what? He does go from one thing to another thing to another thing. There is something happening there, at least, To the Lighthouse, takes place over a 10-year span of time. Things change, characters change, life events happen. You want to know what happens. Those
really? As my friend Richard from the UK, we have a mutual friend who we call it proper literature. Should have a plot.
Should have a plot. Yeah. And I think, I have to say, I probably read way more British literature than American literature at all. And I love the British mystery writers, from way back. If anybody would show me the deepest honor in the universe, they would compare my work to Dorothy Sayers' work, which is just the most splendid, intelligent, character building in the world. I love Agatha Christie. She's the most read writer in the world. It's like, well, what's wrong with that?
Yes.
She's just stupendous at developing characters. She was a brilliant plotter. It's like, well, okay, you can put her down if you want to, and the contemporary women who are writing in British mysteries are absolutely astonishing. Tana French and Denise Mina. Robert Galbraith is actually J.K. Rowling, and her stuff is just spectacular. So
I know. Unfortunately, the YA space isn't loving J.K. She's miffed some of us on her.
I'm sorry about that.
Yes.
No, I agree.
You become the one who's like, she who shall not be mentioned. But yes.
Well, we'll call her Robert Galbraith for these.
Yes, 100. I wanted to show you the chat really blew up on your lit-fic. Lots of agreeing. Nothing happens in lit-fic. Literary fiction, so many pages of nothing happening. Proper literature. Side note, love the Brit expression, lost the plot.
Lost the plot. They definitely lost the plot. It's like, wait a minute, you're winning awards for this?
I know.
I just don't read it anymore. And literally, I've read everything. For my PhD, I had to read all of literature, from the beginning of time. And well, it just ended in the 1990s. For American fiction, it's like, oh boy, boring.
Yeah, it was a tough spot. We are going to do something a little different. I am going to go to rapid fire questions and then switch to craft because so many of our questions have been coming in are great and some of them are craft related. I thought I'd mix the two. So I'm going to toss up our rapid questions banner and we're going to do this.
Okay.
Get to my spot. Tell me when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to give you full screen on this. So it's just you. Alrighty. What is your best virtue?
My best virtue is I'm very real. I'm super real.
I love that. What is your latest obsession?
My latest obsession is my collie puppy. I'm completely in love with her, and she's very naughty.
We love fur babies here, so we.
Oh well, surprisingly enough, she's naughty in here, so
well, that's okay. She's
you have to meet her another time.
We'll have to talk to her manager. What was the last book that you loved?
The last book that I loved. Let's see. Okay, so this is a little off the subject, but I'm actually reading a biography of Marjorie Merriweather Post, who was the heiress to the Post serial. I love her so much. What a character she was. So her DC home here, Hillwood, I just visited it. So it caused me to read her. She built Mar-a-Lago, of all things. She did not sell Trumps. But so I'm totally enchanted by that. So she's such an interesting person, like super, super wealthy, but she divorced E.F. Hutton because he did not support FDR's New Deal. It's like, go Marjorie.
I know. She was hardcore. I'll have to read that book. I actually haven't. I know about her through a documentary I watched a number of years ago that was fascinating. So what is your favorite word?
My favorite word?
Any word.
I'm sorry, what?
Any word.
Any word in the whole wide world. Well, I have to say, I love my sons so much. So sons.
Oh, I'm a mama's boy, so I 100%.
Oh, goody. They're the best. They're the world's the best.
What would you say is your least favorite word?
Disgruntled.
Okay. What is your favorite curse word?
I have such a rich vocabulary in that department. It would be really hard to choose.
Just the one.
I say fuck a lot.
I do too. That's my favorite. And I'm like, you put it with all kinds of things.
You really can. Yeah. Yeah. You know, my children will tell you, they're totally grown now, but they learned all their curse words almost from me, not on purpose, but it was just spontaneous. I mean, I was a single mother, so I did not have much temper left at the end of the day. So they just came out. I did have a rule, which was I was not going to teach the multisyllabic ones to them. So they learned all the good old Anglo-Saxon punch words from me. So
all the good ones. I'm loving.
And they're really good at it too.
People are throwing in chat. These are fun ones.
Oh yeah, I like twat too.
Twat, splendiferous. Never even heard that one, but that's fun. So many good ones here. All right, I'm gonna get back. Sorry, I got off track, friends. So
good. Oh yeah, aluminum. That's a bad word. Yeah, that's.
Well, he's saying it's because in British it's aluminium.
Aluminium
is how they say it, and we say aluminum, which drives him crazy. So, and I like to really say aluminum just to really drive it home. Okay, what annoys you the most?
God, one of my deans said when I took a job as a fundraiser where you do have to do a lot of ass kissing, he said, well, you're going to be really good at this job, except for one thing. You don't suffer fools gladly, which I really genuinely do not. So yeah, people are just like intentionally stupid. That does not go over big.
Same. Lands like a lead turd in my house. Okay, what sin are you most likely to forgive of the 7 deadly?
Of the 7 deadly. Okay, somebody has to run through them for me quick.
Greed, gluttony, envy, lust. Let me have someone help me. I'm forgetting my sins.
I know.
Gluttony, envy, lust. Oh my goodness, where is Aphrodite Lee when I need her? She can rattle these off easily to me. I'm stuck on 4. So I've got 4 sins. You can eat too much.
Okay, well, I'll pick one. I'll pick one of those. So what am I most likely to forgive? Probably envy.
Okay.
I have envy in spades.
I say, what sin are you most likely to be guilty of committing?
Well, when I was a lot younger, it's probably lust.
Fair. Gluttony.
Gluttony. Yeah, that's good.
Mine's all the food. What can always bring a smile to your face?
My sons.
Fair.
And my dog, Fiona.
Oh, where else would you live besides the United States?
I was watching the woman who lives in Ireland, your guest. I would definitely live in Ireland. I'm like 99% Irish, so I've never been there, but I feel like it would feel very comfortable. But I would definitely live in England too. I love England. Like I feel like I've lived there in my imagination probably most of my life. So I think mostly anywhere in the UK I'd be good. Oh, here, Margaret has the list.
Envy, gluttony, greed.
Sloth. Oh, I would definitely forgive sloth. No problem.
Yeah, same.
Very slothful.
Same. Okay, I gotta learn. I gotta get on the sins if I'm gonna be asking the question. That was terrible. Where are you the happiest?
Margaret here.
I know. Thank goodness they didn't leave me hanging. What? Where is your happiest place?
Where's my happiest place? Mm-hmm. It's at home with my kids. My boys.
Mm-hmm. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I'd like to be able to fly.
I like that.
Flying would be good. I don't like flying in airplanes. It'd be really convenient to fly.
Yes, totally. Let's say that you could meet any author, dead or alive. Who would you want to meet and have dinner with?
Well, okay, so he actually has written books. Okay, so I'll pick a real author, Chaucer. I would so sit down to dinner with Chaucer. I think he'd just be a laugh riot, and it would be we'd eat really good food too.
I like all of that. Last question is, what trait would your friends say they admire most about you?
That they admire the most about me. I'm very belligerent. So
I like that. I appreciate that about you.
I'm a fighter.
I'm throwing up these powers because they're brilliant. Power to stop time, would love that one.
That's good.
Invisibility, that could be very, very handy.
That could be really handy.
I will give a tip. If you want to be invisible on a live stream with people, log in and don't tell them you're there, and you can hear them talking. So like I've been invisible on a few live streams where I've heard people talking about me before I got there. So tip off your tuber friends. You can sometimes hear what people think. Okay, let's move on. We're going to get into those craft questions and live chat because you had lots of great questions from the live chat. I'm actually going to start with those because my husband is a mystery thriller lover. So he has
all right.
It is up here. So I'm sorry, bear with me. Here it was. Do you prefer writing bad guys or good guys?
I have a soft spot for the bad guys.
Soft spot for the bad guys?
Yeah, they're usually more interesting.
Fair.
Isn't that what I think Stanley Fish said about that? Paradise Lost. Like the devil is so much more interesting.
100%. 100%. And for my husband, it is actually a protagonist and an antagonist. And it would be great if we covered those terms before you hopped in chat. But I'm just kidding. Someone will tease me for it later, trust. Do you write scenes in order or do you hop around and then weave the scenes together? Love that question.
I definitely write in order. And I work with a lot of people who try that slicing and dicing of writing scenes in a different order. It almost never works. Again, I come from a very traditional background. I love art films where you're messing up time and so on, but it hardly ever works actually in books. So I write them chronologically and just stick with that.
I like it. Is there a genre you would not write in?
Probably dark urban fantasy. No.
Interesting.
I don't like cities, so I'm like a small town girl.
Yeah.
So I'm not that interested in cities. I mean, to me, already they're dark.
Yeah. So, what sort of research was necessary for writing about a CIA agent?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, because I, of course, know nothing about it whatsoever. So, of course, I have my main male character be a spy. It's like, oh, okay. But my cousin is actually married to somebody in the CIA. So I called her up one day and said, do you mind talking about it? And she said, no, I don't mind talking about it at all. But you'll find out that I actually know very little. So that was the most interesting thing about it was like, so I'm not writing about a spy because that would have been hard because I would have either had to make up a lot of stuff or I would have actually had to understand spycraft, which I don't really, but I talked to her about what it was like to be married to a spy, which was riveting because she had actually knows nothing. Right. She knows nothing. They've been married for a very long time. She did not know where he was, what he was doing. She did not know when he was leaving. She didn't know when he was coming back. She couldn't reach him. She could call somebody at Langley and ask them to get in touch with him, but and he could call her, but she could not call him. And she'll never know. He can never tell her. There will never be a time that it's like declassified what he's been doing. And he was pretty high up there. She could take him to Langley, but she had to drop him off at the gate. She couldn't even go in, even though she had to be vetted to marry him. She couldn't go to their Christmas parties because you have to have the same classification to drink together. And they had 7 children. So to me, that was just the most fascinating. I just was absolutely riveted by that. Well, he could tell her what he ate. And sometimes she could tell where he was by what he was eating. But that was the only thing he could tell. It was absolutely riveting.
That was my husband is asking this question. Part of the reason he's so fascinated by this, so I had security clearance for a little while when I was lobbying. So I went through that experience. It was interesting. And I would tell anyone it's fascinating. And the things that I had to do to maintain it was crazy. The stuff they look into is deep. I mean, they found blogs and things I had long since deleted. So like nothing is off limits. And I was shocked at the people they interviewed that were like so far in my past that I hadn't seen.
Wow.
Fascinating. So that was really interesting. And then same experience, my Uncle Denny was Air Force and finished his career at Langley. And the only time we ever got to go was his retirement. And it was a special section that is not actually on base. So you're you're at Langley, but you're not in Langley to go to the retirement thing. It's like a facility they had for functions off base. The interesting thing that I learned from Denny's experience was that the folks who are actually CIA, they could pass away and their family members would never know like what happened, where they were.
No.
I mean, that to me is incredible. And so many great stories there. I mean, it's just
and to me it's like, obviously my marriage didn't last and I didn't get married again.
Right.
To me, like marriage is already so tricky. It's like, what if you have this enormous body of knowledge that by law you can't know?
Yep.
It's like, how in the world?
And then to have 7 kids.
The faith to be married to somebody, and to be married to somebody about whom you could know nothing. I mean, he genuinely could have another family.
Sure.
It would be easy.
Yeah.
My cousin said very few CIA marriages last.
I believe that. I 100% believe that because the just the secrecy level.
The secrecy. Just what you can't know.
Is a lot. And
so that's what ends up being most central is that she can't know where he is or what he's doing.
Which honestly adds a whole layer of tension for a writer that's just sort of right there. I love this question. What do you think about writing stories that feature, involve, highlight themes that are the opposite of the views that you hold personally?
Well, actually, that was part of my exercise in American Queen is can I write characters that I actually have contempt for? And it ended up being a really good exercise. So it's not a one-on-one correspondence, but she ends up getting close to the wife of someone who has risen very quickly in politics and pretty undeservedly.
Gave me House of Cards. When I read the blurb, I was like, this reminds me of House of Cards.
It is, it's like, well, wasn't House of Cards a prediction? Good Lord, who knew? So she ends up, what ends up being kind of central to the story, which was a big surprise to me, was that even with this very overpopulated world, like I went from Algebra of Snow, where there's only one character, to American Queen, where she's married, her mother lives next door, her father is right there. She's a DC socialite, so she actually having parties is her job. She has 5 children. She has a nanny. The whole, like, she's got this whole overpopulated world, but within that world, her husband is gone a lot of the time. She's very close to her family, but it's like, and she has all these little kids, but it's very possible with the little kids to be really lonely because they just, they're little kids.
Right.
So she ends up having in common with this woman that they're both lonely. And that becomes a bond for them. And that was a big surprise to me. I was like, what in the hell? Where did that come from? So I ended up having more sympathy for the other woman than I probably should have. And then, the woman's husband is like, this is just going to be a jerk. But he turns out to be alluring because somebody who is going to have that kind of success has to have charisma. They just do. They can't not have it. However false it is, however manipulative, they do have to have it. So he definitely has it. He has that.
I'm going to go to this one real quick. Author J.C. Carpenter came in a bit late for the Algebra of Snow. Could you give her like a quick breakdown of what we kind of discussed about it?
Yeah. It's a woman mathematician. She's a professor of mathematics at Stony Brook University who's alone in the Adirondack Mountains in the winter. So really nothing happens. There are no other characters, but her husband does show up briefly, but they're in the process of getting divorced, my favorite subject. And she goes into, it's a study of the kind of imago of abandonment that is being recreated in her divorce. So it's a psychological thriller, and it's a question of whether she's going to survive that experience or not. Much like Margaret Atwood's Surfacing, is like, if you dive into those depths, into the depths of painful trauma from the past, will you survive? And I think that's the reason people don't do it. It's like, am I going to come out of this or not? So that is the story. I won't tell you what happened.
I like that. You'll have to let you buy it. Richard, who would say bad things about me? All of my exes. I can send you a list.
But they're always good for bad characters.
They are. They're good for a bad guy. Bad guys and villains are so much fun to write. I agree. To me, they're always the more interesting characters because there's more to be like. There's more to dig beneath there. There's more to that onion. But they need a reason to be bad. It needs to make twisted, logical sense. Yes. Don't just make them mustache twirlers. Yes to this.
Really true.
Yes, this is more of a problem, I think, for me with my friends that write for kiddos too. Yeah. And it's because sometimes we forget that kids are smarter than we give them credit for.
They're way smarter.
Write layered characters and they'll get it. Margaret says horror for me. This is the genre I think they wouldn't write in. Horror, that's interesting. I would probably try romance before I'd try horror. Richard says no.
Me too. Romance. Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
They like this. It's interesting to hear Stephanie Barron and Alma Katsu talk about this. Some of my fave CIA turned author role models.
Oh, interesting. Oh, cool.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Mrs. Wilson, the series, What a Nightmare, Spy Secrets and Other Families.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I love all of those.
Oh, great.
All of those vibes. All right, let me ask you a couple craft questions of my own. So now let's do the thing I love to ask everyone who's in my hot seat. Is there a craft book that you say to your students, read this? Get this book, check it out, or is there something craft related nonfiction that you say authors should read?
So I have a whole stack of them. So, but one of them that for people writing novels, I definitely recommend Donald Moss's Writing the Breakthrough Novel. It's really important because he really talks about how important that theme is and how it has to be central. And he talks about creating tension. In the plot and how to do that by creating ups and downs. You can't just go full steam the whole time. You have to let up. There has to be, something terrible happens, something good happens, something even worse happens, something even better happens.
Sure.
You have to build that tension. He does a really good job of discussing that.
Well, I just dropped the link to that in the discussion for everyone. So if anyone wants to find it, it is there in the discussion box below.
And then, for publishing, I like Austin Kleon's books. I think it's really important. He makes a super important contribution that you're much more in charge of this than you think you are.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. When writing, we've talked about the plotsing, pantsing, all of that. So you're just solely a pantser. So here's my question for you. As a mystery writer, do you know the ending? Do you know who done it by the end? Or do you know that going in? Or how does that work as a pantser?
No.
Make it make sense to me.
So I don't really know going into it. Again, I'm this super rational person and I have a Ph.D. and all that. But there are some really woo-woo things that happen sometimes. I remember having a really great massage one time and seeing the end of a book, just all of a sudden, it just the whole scene was right there. So sometimes they will just come to me. I really just let them develop. I want to be surprised. I didn't know American Queen was going to end where it did. It ends with the husband gone. I was like, well, he's going to come back, isn't he? He's like, well, nope. So I think now I have to write a sequel because I didn't know where that was going to end.
Interesting.
And The Body of Summer, that was a total surprise. And it's a bit of I've had people say, well, you know what, you have to make this fit the detective genre because the actual criminal does pay the price at the end, which is what most people want from mysteries. They want that justice, which you don't get in life so often. I think that's a lot of reason people read mysteries is because they're just longing for that justice. But the person that's a manipulator behind the scenes does not. He does not pay a price other than losing his job. And I've had people say, "We can't do that. You know, he has to pay." It's like, well, he just didn't, and that's all there is to it. So I can't make it be any different than it is. So that was a surprise too. That, you know, that was definitely a surprise.
I love that. Now that we're talking about craft, we had something we didn't shift to that I'm going to shift back to now, but this is a good time to talk about it. So you offer through your website some opportunities for folks to hire you for consulting, either on their books to do an actual assessment, and then you also are enrolling for your Tell Your Story program. I am going to hand it over to you, do a full-on plug, and let us know how folks can find it, what they get out of it, like give all the things.
Yeah. So the main work that I do is all one-on-one. So there are group opportunities that people can avail themselves of, but really the heart and soul of my work is working one-on-one with individual writers. My favorite thing to do is to take it through all 4 stages: the early conception, through that shitty first draft, through crafting the draft, and into the learning how to connect, learning how to pitch. Getting that set up for successful publication. So that's my favorite thing, because I can save people a ton of frustration and trouble and time from the beginning if I'm there. But I can do any part of that process, any quarter of that process, or if people want to just come in at the end and get that prepared for publication, writing the synopsis, writing the query, getting the pitch ready, knowing how to research agents or publishers, or how to choose a publishing path. I can also do that as a separate consultation. I do a ton of free teaching. I'm also right now doing some writing Wednesdays where people can just come write with me. So there's just a little group of people, and I don't know why it's so nice to write with other people. It's like, we're not doing anything. We're just writing. Wednesday or Eastern, you can come write with me. So
I love that. I love that. Talk to me a little bit about the process that someone would have if they did Tell Your Story program. Is it self-led? Is it like one-on-one with you kind of a thing?
Like all one-on-one with me. So it's all, so I really call it a private MFA, except it's even better than that, because I'm teaching you the different stages of rating. I'm also doing developmental edits every quarter. So for every quarter, you get a total, professional review of your manuscript, with exactly how to take it to the next level. Then in our teaching sessions together, I'm teaching you generally about that stage of rating, but we're actually applying it to your book. So it's super duper custom.
Love that.
It's just, there's a ton of writing programs out there.
Sure.
This is like totally individualized.
Yeah. Well, and with someone who's got a PhD, right?
Exactly.
You're not just doing your course coming from no background of writing. So I appreciate that. I have the link to it in the description box below. It is easy to find also on your website.
It is easy.
So I would tell folks, if you're interested in either of those, be sure and check those that your website out for that resource. So on the 1-hour book assessment, great idea. So what does that look like? Is someone giving you a certain amount of pages, or is there a limit to like what you have time to go over with someone, or how do you kind of keep that?
Yeah, so there's a really thorough interview question. So you submit a ton of answers to me first, so I have a chance to really look through all of that. And then we just get on the phone and you tell me all about your book. So I really listen deeply to what your book is about, what you want from it, where you're going with it. And then we talk about, ways to move forward from there. So, it's a chance for you to really explain your book to a professional and have me deeply hear you.
Love it. Love it. Okay. I was looking at my notes and went, oh my gosh, I forgot to mention that. So before we went too deep down the craft thing, I was like, I'm going to throw that in there because this is a good time to talk about it. Yeah. Let me shift back. What would you say is your writing kryptonite?
My what?
Writing kryptonite. So like Superman.
My writing kryptonite is so boring. It's like super duper boring. Write every day, 1 to 2 pages. That is all. That's it. It is just as simple as the day is long. You know, whatever, whether you're a lark or an owl, there's one little other piece of that I think is really important is the more unconscious you are, the better. Like if you can get up and write before you're awake, or you write at night when you're too tired, that can be really helpful. It can really keep your punishing editor out of the room.
That's a great tip. I love that. So more, because I write first thing in the morning when I wake up, usually before the coffee's kicked in. Anybody who's gotten an email from me before noon knows that, because there'll be misspellings and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But it actually is a great idea because sure, you're just kind of on autopilot at that point.
Yes. It's way better that way. And it is, you know, you have to figure out all kinds of tricks to keep that editor from waking up too early until you get to that stage of writing.
Yeah.
So you got to trick that editor. It's like Virginia Woolf calls it the angel in the house. It's like, oh, it has to be perfect. You know, this isn't good enough, blah, blah, blah. And you just have to shove them out of the room or stick them in a corner, or she stabbed her with a pen. So
interesting.
We got to get them out of there somehow.
Richard's writing kryptonite is free time. 100% agree. That's an easy distraction. Mine is currently book talk. Heading out 70 minutes to DMV. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you for coming, Maggie. We appreciate having you, and good luck on the license for the little one today. Sending you all the best on that.
Oh, boy.
All right, here is one that I love. What is the easiest concept to teach a new writer?
What is the easiest concept?
Yeah,
so the easiest concept really is that it's a process. I have so many people be so relieved by that idea, you know, that you just need to be in the stage that you're in, and not worry about the other stages yet, and just really enjoy it, know how to be in that stage, you know how to make the most of that particular stage, and don't try to be somewhere else.
Okay, I'm trying to type these in so I can throw them in the chat as we go. What would you say is the hardest concept to teach a new writer?
That it actually is really hard. That is really hard. It's not you. It's hard for everybody. It's hard for me. I've been doing it a really long time. I have a PhD, and it's really hard work. And to, you know, it's like anything hard you've done, you know, gone to school, gotten a degree, worked a hard job, raised a kid, raised a dog. It's the hardness that makes it satisfying, but you have to embrace the hardness. While you're resisting it, you can get nowhere. Is to really love that, is to love the challenge of it, and to take that on.
I love that. That's perfect. In your experience, what would you say most writers get wrong about publishing?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this before, is that there's only one way to do it. You know, that's just, it's never been true. It has never been true. It is certainly not true now. So, as we said before, you can get whatever you want. You just have to understand what that means, and be all in on it, whatever it is.
I always say to people, it's like the old Reese's ad when we were growing up, like there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's, and there's no wrong way.
There's no wrong way to publish.
Well, the only
thing you can do is to not have a good book.
Yes. The other one I would say beware of is vanity publishers, because you can self-publish, you can hybrid publish. Avoid the vanities if you can, because you're really just going to end up with a garage full of books, and we don't need that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you need to know what you're doing, and you need to follow people who are going to teach you what is good. And you can't know that. You cannot know that. It is a very complicated industry. So, you know, identify the people who actually know what they're talking about, go with them. I would say the other thing that I see, I'm sure I'm just going to insult all kinds of people, because I always do when I say this, but it's like, just really be conscious of cover design. If you're going indie, 99% of independent published books look independently published. If you want it to look mainstream, pay for it. Get a really good, top quality designer and pay for it. So I was in one group where they were saying, oh, somebody said it would cost me $600 for a cover design. Everybody was saying, oh, $600 is outrageous. You can have it done for $60 on Fiverr. It's like, you know what? It's going to look exactly like $60 on Fiverr. It's like, no, $600 is nothing for a good cover design.
Agreed. That's one place I absolutely love and encourage everyone to check out Heidi Thorne. She does a self-publishing podcast, gives great advice. The one place Heidi and I disagree, I mean the only one, is covers. And she and I go round and round about this all the time, where I say, Heidi, I'm telling you in fiction, I don't buy a book if the cover blows. Like, I'm just real talk.
No.
Like, I love a good cover, and and
you have 6 seconds. That is exactly how much time. I have so many people want to put all this stuff on the cover.
Yep.
Like, no, one image.
Yes.
No, this is American Queen. That's it.
Yes.
That's it. That's all that can be there.
Yeah. I love Richard says, make your indie books look traditional to beat that stigma.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have a good book. Write a damn good book. Work really hard at it. Get all the help you need doing that. Don't think you can do that yourself, and have a damn good cover.
Totally.
Those are the 2 things that matter.
Totally agree. I can't, and I agree with you on the cost too. The way I say it to people, and I do it in a harsh truth kind of way. Listen, if you were in business school and I was teaching you business, I'd be telling you, you have to invest in yourself. You have to.
It's really, terrible. You can definitely go about it as a hobby, and again, people can invest what they want to invest, but I think it's just like you're saying, it's like, if you want a good education, you're going to pay for a good education. There's a million ways to do it, but if you want top quality, you're going to need to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, and I've talked about this. This is another thing I've talked about in my world, because part of business school for me, and part of what I was teaching my kiddos was, bartering is a thing. And outside of the United States, it's actually a really popular thing. Yeah. And major corporations do it. Like the case study I used in my classes, and I won't get into it, it's boring, but it was Coca-Cola was the company we used. Oh, wow. And they used a bartering system in parts of Africa as they were setting up.
That's not boring.
Their distribution stream, which is interesting to me, that a huge conglomerate, when they were trying to find local craftsmen to bring into work, there wasn't a clear conversion. So bartering was a way to get things done. They were providing them with things their communities needed in exchange for the workers and the labor. So again, I think it's about looking for outside the box. Hey, Nia, great, thanks you for joining us. Kind of figuring out ways, if the financial barrier is the burden, which I get it, right?
Absolutely. Totally.
What you were talking about with your friend who helped design the cover for Body of Summer, it sounds kind of like a bartering situation where
it definitely is barter. I edit his books. Luckily, I love his books. I wouldn't do it otherwise. And he produces mine. So.
Oh, Richard, here we go. Coke, Pepsi for life. Okay, I'm not even getting into that discussion with you, Richard. But yes. For me, it will always be Pepsi because of that Joan Crawford line from Mommy Dearest. And it's Pepsi from that point on, just because I love that scene. But anyway, so I wanted to point that out, that you had used bartering. And so I don't want to discourage anybody.
No, it's really true.
Geez, I don't have $650. It does not matter. Like, if there is a will, there is a way. And
just like go look at people's good book covers. Like, I know people who are doing it themselves and doing them really well, but they've done a really deep market analysis. Like, they know what their genre looks like, and they have, enough know-how or talent to figure out how to imitate that look. But yeah, definitely look at your comps.
Yes.
And if you can do it yourself, great. There's people may know Kirsten Oliphant, who just does a great job writing and talking about self-publishing, and she just does a great job with her own covers. So you can do it, and hers look like traditionally published rom-coms. That's her genre.
I love this. Study your genre to see what works and what fits in. Or go to the
Absolutely.
bookshop and look at the shelf you want to be on.
That's exactly right.
150%. Richard has nailed it on that.
Yeah.
I wish more would do that. And here's the thing, a little bit of harsh truth and love for my people. This is why you got to know your genre, and you got to know your subgenre. Because saying I'm this genre, I'm that genre, I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere.
Yes.
If you were to walk into an agent, they would turn you away immediately because you don't know enough about your genre to know where it fits on that bookshelf. And
that's exactly right. And if you're going to pitch, you better know exactly what genre you're going in.
And really have read in it.
Really have read it. Have your comps down pat. Yeah.
Because those agents are going to ask you. The first time I did a pitch contest to agents here at St. Louis Writers Guild, I didn't know they'd ask me questions. And so they asked me questions about my comps. I'd only read one of the two. And they asked me questions about the other one. And I didn't take the time to look to see that the agent I was pitching had agented that book. So learn that from me, friends. Learn from me.
You have to do deep research on it. If you're pitching agents, you need to know everything about them. Get a subscription for a month on Publishers Marketplace and look at their whole history.
Yes, 100%. I would recommend that to my newbies. So anyway, all right. How did publishing your first book change your writing process, or did it?
Because
you had that kind of disruption with the agent to the doing it yourself. So like, how did that?
Well, so that first one, so Algebra is a small press. So that was published by a small press. I had an assistant at the time, so she could send it out to a bunch of places and we had time to do the research and so on.
Sure.
So, it was a good experience. It was, a reasonable small press, but I think I was surprised by how much of it I had to do myself. And by the time I'd gotten through that experience, and there have been hiccups, like he lost the stats on how many copies he sold and stuff like that. I was like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What's the big advantage? So I think after doing that, and I don't think that's true of all small presses. I think small niche publication can be extremely good. Mine wasn't a particularly good experience, and I didn't see a lot of advantages to doing it that way. So I think that just made it way easier for me to, when I circled back around to, deciding I was going to get my books in the world, to just say, oh, what the heck, I'm doing this myself. I know how to do this. I know how to write a good book. I have a great publisher. I'm going for it.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the small press situation. I had some guests on a couple of weeks ago who have had great success with.
Absolutely, it can be a fantastic way to go. Fantastic.
When I asked, actually two of my last guests, so one of the ones I asked what her biggest benefit was the editorial side. That helped her most. Now for you,
totally can see that. Yeah.
And now for you would have had a lot of that skill yourself. So what benefit out of it, for you? What would you take away from that small press experience that was the positive?
It is good, especially if you have a really good small press. You do get some status from that. I mean, that is part of publishing. Is do you have it gets you some credibility that independent publishing doesn't. So a good small press, I would definitely try that, especially. And I think the other thing about small press publishing is that there are a lot of niche publishers, and you are much more likely to get published there. So if it is absolutely worth doing that research and seeing if you can find a good small publisher. But again, a lot of people I know, it ends up being a bit frustrating because you aren't getting the marketing or PR support. But you're not getting that in mainstream either. So
I was going to say, unless I have one friend, and they got the unicorn deal, so they did get a big deal.
Yeah.
They are a lead title for their time next year, and again, so they are getting marketing, right? Every other Trad Hub friend I know keeps a portion of their advance to do their own marketing.
Absolutely.
If you're not doing it, you're losing out, kids.
It's really true.
I love this comment for you. If you don't learn and improve your workflow and craft with every project, you're missing the point.
That is really, really, it is definitely iterative. I've gotten better and better at everything with every book.
We might have hit on this a little bit with the cover thing, but I'm just curious, what is the best money you have ever spent in your writing career?
It's probably my PhD, so that was a whole lot of money. So I always joke with people, it's like, well, I'm not cheap for sure, but I don't cost $150,000. So I'm way cheaper than that.
I'm going to answer this verbally instead of typing because it makes my screen bounce, Richard. So probably not. And I talked about this earlier. I don't trust myself, Richard. And I mean that like wholly, implicitly, and always. Like I need someone else to tell me when it's okay to publish. And yes, I will publish it on Microsoft Word for Ben. Ben hates Word. He did a whole live stream where he went off on Word and how ridiculous it was yesterday. And I sat there for an hour just in rapture. How long on average does it take you to write a book?
So yeah, I'm definitely not one of those crank it out people. So it takes me at least a year and sometimes more than that. Like I think American Queen took about 3 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
I'm very slow. very slow.
Me too. So do you feel any pressure? I do as well, by the way, JC Carpenter, but this rant that Ben did was just like epic. He's a
So what does he do instead of Word?
I think Scrivener.
Scrivener? Okay.
I think it's Scrivener. And listen, it's a hot debate around here on the author tubes about who uses what, and we get real upset about it. What's funny is you and I could probably feel Ben on this, at least I could. Part of what he was griping about was for nonfiction. He was like, if you have to do nonfiction work, the citations are awful. 100% agree. For anyone who wrote a thesis or for you who had to defend a dissertation, totally agree with you, Ben. It's awful. You're right.
Although my dissertation actually was a novel, except I had to write a critical preface to my own novel. That was the hardest thing I've ever had.
Sounds so hard.
It was total hell. Yes, it was total hell.
Gosh. And then did you get to pick your own committee?
I did, yes. Okay. And I had a mathematician on it too to make sure I hadn't like totally screwed up the math. I've been working with him all along. I went to his classes. He was reading the thing all the way along. So it's like, okay,
I love that. I love that interdepartmental.
I love that too. I loved it. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Okay. Bex has shown up. My co-host from Critique Group Live. So glad to see you. Thank you for popping in. I am going to ask you one more from my list, if I can get it to pull up here. Here we go. What does literary success look like to you?
Literary success looks to me like having people read and appreciate my book. It's it's visibility. It's connecting with really good readers. And I have to say I'm super lucky because my reviews have been really, really good. It's just having people read it and say that it really moved them. Body of Summer, a lot of people said page turners. It's like, yes.
You want
so, it's such a solitary activity, and I love that part of it. But I'm also an extroverted writer, so I love the connection. I love the conversation. I love hearing back from people. So,
I'm going to ask you the most controversial question on AuthorTube this season, and that is: do you believe in writer's block?
I think that the well can feel like it's gone dry. I definitely, and I have all kinds of tricks for dealing with that. So that's part of the work that I do in creativity. So I would say I believe in the belief in writer's block, if that makes any sense. And sure. I do think that there are ways to dance with it that are more productive than others. Resisting it is futile. So it is definitely a dance. The more you lean into it, the more you embrace it, the better off you are, which is pretty much my philosophy about everything. It's like anything negative, don't run from it, lean into it.
Sure. I like that. Here's another one for you. This is from a friend of ours who is currently in a master's program. For MFA, how do you currently go about teaching story structure? Do you use books or movies as examples? And what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, so I come from super traditional background. My degrees are from UVA, and I have a very traditional PhD. My PhD was in literature and creative writing, so I did the whole literature PhD, and additionally did all the creative writing stuff. So I come from a super duper traditional point of view. So not everybody agrees with this. I have looked at all the different methods out there for creating structure, and I think they're good. I've used them. I've tried them out. For me, the way to do it is straight out of Aristotle's Poetics. It's good old Freytag's pyramid. I have a little bit of a twist on that in terms of character building in the rising action, but I pretty much see it as foolproof. And that's a good thing. You just start with the inciting incident, tell the backstory in chronological order, get back to that inciting incident, go through your rising action, make sure you zig and zag through that rising action. You reach that climax, which is the moment where the character changes. It's in Hamlet when he said the readiness is all. It's not the fight scene. It's when there's that internal shift. And then everything that comes after that is because of that shift. That's your falling action. Then you have your good old denouement, your unknotting. It's where everything falls into place, and your wrap it up resolution, where somebody explains everything that happened. So again, I'm very traditional, and I just follow that. It works every time. When I'm plotting a book, I just when I've already written it, because I'm such a pantser, I have to look backwards at it and see whether I got that dramatic Aristotelian dramatic form in or not. And I just actually put it up on my wall. It's like, okay, well, did I do it? And then I tweak to make sure that it fit into that. That's what I do. That's what I teach.
This question is clearly specific to a feeling they're having in their program, but do you follow a specific outlining system, and do you push that system on your students, or let them choose? That feels oddly specific.
Oh my goodness! Oh, I hate to you have to tell me what that is. What's happening to you?
I know. I want to learn it too.
That's why I work one-on-one with people. I just, once again, I'm going to sound more woo-woo than anything in here, but I feel like there's a book calling your name that wants to come through you. And you really don't, you can do crafting to that, but that book needs to come through you the way it wants to come through you. Again, it's like kids. It's like, I thought before I had kids, well, it's all about nurture. It's like, you can just train them to be what you want them to be. It's like, oopsies. That did not happen. I have two sons who are extremely close. They're only 18 months apart in age. They look exactly, they sound, I don't even know who it is on the phone, but they could not be more different people. They are completely different, and I had to raise them totally differently because they are who they are. I could not make them be anything other than who they are. So I'm the coach. I'm a very interventionist coach. I'm a pretty bossy mom, but it was all about understanding who they are and being, deeply empathetic to who they are. And to me, it's the same as with my stories. It's like, they are who they are. I'm here to bring them into the world as best as I possibly can.
Sure. I love Sarah's here, yoga teacher, and here for the woo-woo.
Good. Yeah.
Hashtag bossy mom. For anyone that doesn't know Sarah, Sarah's new to me. I just found her channel yesterday and does some amazing interviews herself. So be sure and check out her channel if anybody in here is new.
Yeah, definitely.
I like to shout out for new people. Okay, one more question for you. So do you teach, this one is the last one from my craft person in school. Do you teach esoteric craft theory or genre fiction? And I was just like, I don't even know what that is. So
With esoteric, I don't exactly know what that is either.
Okay.
So,
Got it. I was
so
like,
I actually, again, when I'm teaching in creative writing, we're really, it's all workshop. And so I go with whatever people bring. So some people are writing in genre, and, the way that I teach people how to critique, because I think people have to learn that. If they're in a writing group, it's really important to learn how to critique. It's like, you first have to make it clear that you know what it wants to be. You don't come into it with a set of expectations. You can't turn dark urban fantasy into James Joyce.
Right.
That's not what it wants to be.
Right. Well, different payoffs, right? I have different expectations as a fantasy reader than they would. So
yeah. So that your first job is to understand what it wants to be, and then talk about what's working and what could be better.
I love that. I think that's a good answer. And this is a vibe that we were all feeling in Googling esoteric craft theory in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes, that was 100% all of us. So how to stay deep, empathetic, and yet also corral that work in progress into something that has a narrative arc, is compelling, and isn't 2,000 pages long?
Yeah, that's really a good question. So Sarah, that actually fits in really nicely with what I was talking about in terms of the different stages of writing. So I'll just go over that just a little bit, a teeny bit, because like in those first couple of stages, you don't give a shit about narrative arc. It's like you're just writing whatever, and it can be 2,000 pages. If it's going to be 2,000 pages, when you get to that stage of crafting, you're going to have a lot of work to do, because you're going to have to get rid of a lot of stuff. But in those first couple of stages, the conceive and the create stages, where you're just dreaming the book and then you're just drafting the book, you really don't care. It's really important not to care then, because again, you could miss your beautiful book if you didn't put it in. Okay, so good. So you've got 186,000. So you got to lose at least 85,000 of those, I would say. You could be, depends on what your genre is.
Yeah.
But when you get to that craft stage, you do have to care. So that's when you get tough. The tough love. This is where bossy mom. This is where mom has gotten finished, patting them on the head and so on and so on. It's like, well, you got to do this. So that's where bossy mom gets to work after she's been deeply empathetic. And sometimes you need help with that. It's very hard. That is incredibly hard.
Yes, and the hardest part for me is always the cutting. Then what's funny about it though is once it's cut and gone and I go back and reread, I'm always loving the finished product.
Loving it. Or have you ever been edited well, like having somebody come through and cut stuff out? So I always just have this like totally bad reaction. Like I just have a bad personality. So it's like, it's like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, it's so beautiful. Why'd you do that? And then I like look at it after I've finished losing my mind, and it's like, oh, well, you know what? It actually is way better. It's like, oh shoot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I do, and I'm not the only writer. I'm sure we all do this, but I do think all of my words are just amazing.
Yes, because I love them.
But it turns out that a good chunk of them are just not necessary to the story.
No. I was when I first wrote the short story of the Algebra of Snow, because that novel did come out of a short story. I gave it to, in creative writing programs, you have these visiting writers who come in and they were, great. I had incredible people reading my stuff. Russell Banks read my stuff. And Vivian Gornick came in and read the short story of the Algebra of Snow. Yes, exactly. Terrific writer. And she said, well, this is actually, this could be a really good story. So it's like, oh, yes, I'm so great. I'm the world's best writer. Vivian Gornick loves my stuff. She says, except it has to be made obedient to the central metaphor of mathematics. Oh my God, I didn't do this because I'm Southern. I didn't do this to her. But like I went home, it's like I said to all my friends, what is wrong with her? She's some kind of Nazis, this S&M made obedient to, blah, blah, blah. And then, after a little while, I looked at it and said, oh, shoot. This needs to be made obedient to the central metaphor of mathematics. It's like, it made it a way better story. It's like, oh.
I what's funny about that to me, I can see it, math person, so I can see that. At the same time, knowing my publishing people, nobody would know. I cannot tell you how many of my writing people are like, I don't do the maths. That's why I write.
Yeah, sometimes you definitely need help. Although what I would say about beta readers, if you're giving it to non-professionals, wait until you have a consensus of opinions around anything.
Yes.
Because if you start changing it to meet everybody's ideas, you are going to have a
please no one. Yeah, you'll please nobody. I love this. I hate going through editing because it's my baby you're cutting there, but once it's done, I'm like, oh, okay, you're absolutely right. Yes, 100.
It's so frustrating. I know, exactly.
I have a love
very humbling
with editing. That's so true.
Very humbling.
Still struggling to get to the second half of that. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to get through and see what we're talking about. It's is it worth once it's complete? You can't see it like really that until it's finished up.
Oh, it's hard.
And isn't it true that it's sometimes the other, thank you so much, Heather, for popping in. I appreciate you. It's sometimes really hard to for us to see what others can see. So that's why you're writing
yes,
your critique groups, your betas, all of that is just critical.
It is really critical, yes. But again, with your groups, be very selective. Be with people who are rating at the same level, who have the same standards. Yeah.
Yes, I will. Beck says this. I have no issues cutting my darlings and editing. She and I write together. So
cool.
Oftentimes I'll give her notes. One time she sent me a story that was like 2,000 words. I gave her notes. She sent me back a story that was 600 words. And I went, what just happened to most of the story? It was much better. But yes, I was like, wow, okay, it
can really be tough. Yeah. Yeah, it is tough love. That is for sure. At that stage of the process, but you don't want to do that earlier. Put them all in there to begin with.
Exactly. We're going to ask our last question of our guest, and then I'm going to give you some time to do a little outro and let folks know where they can find you if anybody missed the front half. My last question is my favorite question to ask people this season, and it is, what do you think is the most unethical part and practice in publishing?
The most unethical part of publishing. Do you want to specify a kind of publishing? Because there's unethical shit.
No, totally. I leave it open to each person to kind of take their thing and run with it. So the last one, our last guest that came on, Melissa, was telling us she had gone through small presses, and her thing was vanity presses pretending to be hybrid presses. So that was hers, but everybody
I would so look out for hybrid presses, because a lot of them are vanity presses. I would absolutely vet them. Again, somebody like Gene Friedman, I think, has a really good list of the people that are genuine and the ones that aren't. It is really hard to tell, because they'll make it look like they're actually editing your book, or they're going to make sure that it's meeting some kind of quality standards, and it's total baloney. So yeah, hybrid publishing is a buyer beware for sure.
Yeah, check it out. Talk to friends. Anybody who's listening to this, my email is listed on the About section of my YouTube page. Email me. If I don't know someone who knows someone, I have a network of my Writers Guild here in St. Louis that will know someone. So
great.
Write me an email and I will look for you if you're in doubt. So holler at me. Same on agents. I will throw that out there too. There are such things as smagents. So, but same thing. If you don't have a publisher's marketplace, message me. I have one. I'll look it up for you.
Yeah. Great.
Same thing. So that's open to anybody here. All right. I am going to turn it over to you to say whatever you want to say, however you want to close out to everyone. And I'm going to put your scroller back up so people know where they can find you. And take it away, Ginger.
So, Barrett, I just want to say you're so great. I love talking to you. You're the most fun. And I've loved hearing people's questions. And I would be happy to talk to anybody who wants to do a book assessment. They're free. So just look on my website. You'll see a way to sign up for that, or just shoot me an email and say howdy. It's ginger@gingermoran.com, or my website is just gingermoran.com. So I'd love to hear, like I said, I'm an extroverted writer, so I'd love to hear back.
I love that about you. I cannot thank you enough for coming today. I appreciate everybody who showed up before us in chat. I appreciate you more than you know. Thank you, Sarah and Heather and Novel Nana, JC Carpenter, Richard Holiday, everybody who showed up for us. I appreciate you. Maggie, who came and had to go for the DMV. We appreciate you. I want to shout everybody out. If I forgot anybody, I'll drop it in comments below. Please check out Ginger's platform and support her on all of those if you would. And if you happen to pick up her book for Kindle, do not forget to leave a review. Reviews are what authors live on. So reviews. Everyone stay healthy and well. Ginger and I appreciate you coming out for us. And
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.